My original introduction for this was 2 minutes long, which was unacceptable for 2 reasons. The first is that this game is a very quick and very easy to pick up and play game, and the second is that the point I was making wasn't even good enough to be reused for an addendum. Better to be brief, today we're going to be looking at Floria the Verdant Way. Floria the Verdant Way is published in English by Silvervine Publishing and weighs in at less than 100 pages. In this game, most of the world is a magical forest, and within that forest is magical plants simply referred to as herbs, with a capital H. And you play as one of the titular Floria, somebody whom can commune with the herbs and call upon their magical power. You use this power to explore the world and help those who are otherwise unable to solve the problems that require them traveling out into the deeper forest. Short, sweet, and to the point, many of the sections of this game are just a few pages long, and somebody can pretty reasonably read through this over a weekend, and be ready to play once they're done. I mean, I went from barely knowing the rules to running a complete session in less than 24 hours, character creation, and everything. Your mileage may vary, but this is a very lightweight game that hits just enough of every kind of note. So, let's move on through, shall we? We'll start with character creation, which has a very straightforward process, especially if you're familiar with the likes of Dungeons & Dragons. First, you pick your stats. The 4 stats you'll actually be choosing are Strength, which is your physical might and endurance, Will, which is your character's mental fortitude, Dexterity, which is their physical finesse, and Wisdom, which is their knowledge and observational abilities. You get an array of 4 numbers that you can assign one of each to one of these stat attributes: 5, 4, 3, and 2. And whatever it is that you want your character to be best at, you put your 5 into. And what you're okay with them not being so good at, you put your 2 into. There are also 6 other stats, some of which are derived from other things you'll be choosing during character creation, and I'll cover those as they come up. Next, you pick your character's species, and you gain both skills that they possess. This also affixes your initial lines on the lay canvas. The 3 species are Human, which is what you and I are, presumably, Therian, which is an animal of some sort, be it anthropomorphic or not, and Dryad, which is anthropomorphic plant life. Floria leaves these choices fairly open-ended, since your skills are meant to be a reflection of how your species shapes your character physically. You can technically describe your character however you want, so long as you don't try to break the normal rules of the game with your description. I've allowed a player to play as a 50-foot tall tree when they made a Dryad, under the stipulation that they cannot move any further than what their stats would suggest they'd be able to. Then you pick your character's lifestyle, which gives you your mundane skills that are useful during the search phase of the game. You pick 2 from the list of 4 skills that are available to you. The lifestyles are Crafter, which involves a lot of skills that transform items, Traveler, which has a lot of skills that are good for traveling about, and the Gardener, that has skills that make things just a little bit less random. Your last major choice is your magic style, and you gain all the spells from your magic style list. Spells are used during the magic battle phase. The 3 magic types are Branch, which is predominantly offensive spells, Leaf, which is your more defensive spells, and Corolla, which is your healing spells. This will also determine what stats you use for casting spells. So if you're ever in doubt for what you want your stats to be, you can always pick your magic style first, and then pick stats that will maximize your spellcasting ability. After you have your lifestyle and magic type, you then consult the chart on page 13, and that is how you determine your character's agility and vitality. Vitality is how fast you move during the search phase, whereas agility determines how fast you move during the magic battle phase. The remaining stats are automatically determined. Attunement is a special stat that's used for recovering from damage and fatigue. The base for this is 3. Carrying capacity is how many items you can carry, and it's equal to your strength. Familiarity is how strong your character's connections are to the other characters. This always starts at 0 for every character every session. And life points is how much damage you can take before you're knocked out. This has a base of 10. And with all this determined, you can now move on to drawing your initial lines on your lay canvas, and when you're done with that, you're more or less ready to go. The lay canvas is the most important game mechanic in Floria, and it represents the magical power that dwells within your character. You gain your initial lines from your species, magic style, and one free one that you can place anywhere. And when you're drawing lines on the canvas, there are some very important rules you need to follow, as seen on page 26. First, lines must connect points on the canvas. It est where the grid lines intersect. 2. Any drawn line must connect to an existing line. And 3. You cannot overlap lines. Intersecting is fine, however. There's 2 things you'll be using your lay canvas for. The first is for an effect called Magical Burst, which is described on page 26. Basic rolls in Floria are 2d6 rolling at or below a target number. Most often, the target number is 2 of your stats added together. Anytime you need a little extra help to succeed on a roll, though, you can use Magic Burst to get a +1 to the target number. To use a Magic Burst, you color in one square or triangle made by lines that you have drawn on your lay canvas. And by square, the rules mean any quadrilateral, a 4-sided shape. Squares are technically quadrilaterals where every side is equal in length and every angle is 90 degrees, but we're not needing that particular level of geometric accuracy for a silly game of pretend. For every square or triangle you fill in this way, you get a +1 to your target number. This represents using magic to help with the task at hand. You're a Floria, a forest witch, and this is one of the perks that comes with being one. The other things you would use this canvas for is paying for the cost of your spells. In addition to squares or triangles, sometimes many of which you'll need to cast a spell, 2 other shapes you'll be looking for are ribbons, which are 2 triangles connected at a single point, or 5-point stars. The latter of which are very difficult to draw in using the lines, and thus they are the cost for your most powerful of spells. Don't worry too much about if you can't seem to get any stars at the start of the game, though. You'll be drawing in more lines as the game goes on. After the obvious step of establishing why you're even going on your quest in the first place, which the rulebook refers to as a prologue, much of the gameplay takes place in 2 phases, the search phase and the magic battle phase. The search phase is where player characters head into the magic forest and either complete whatever requests the ordinary villagers had for them, or try to solve whatever mystery at hand has come about. You have a map of the section of the forest you're exploring, and the player characters will take turns exploring and looking around. Actions you can take include searching to scout out and see where any items are. Actions you can take include searching, which let you scout out and see where any items, objectives, and pathways on the map are. Searching is dexterity and wisdom, and reveals a number of squares equal to your character's vitality. And those squares that are revealed can be no more than your vitality away from your current position. Other actions include resting, which recovers life points, picking up items that happen to be in an area, completing quest objectives, which will usually call for a stat roll, or socializing with a character who also happens to be on the same space as you, which mutually raises familiarity between those 2 characters. Having familiarity with a given character allows you to assist that character with rolls that they make. And if you know me, you know I love random charts, especially ones with role-playing prompts. Well, guess what Floria has for the socialize action? If you guessed a chart of socializing prompts, you would be correct, and that is listed on page 41. After you've taken your action, you then harvest an herb based on the environment of the space that you're on. This is meant to be random, and while the lack of a chart here completely disappoints me, the rulebook itself helpfully points out that there are 6 types of herbs for each environment, and 6 different environments. And, well, we're using 6-sided dice. I'm pretty sure you see where I'm going with this. When you harvest an herb, you draw a particular shape on your lay canvas depending on what herb it is that you find. And, as a side note, One of the things one of my players had entirely too much fun with was updating their character portrait every time they had a different kind of herb added to their canvas. By the end of the session, their character was a veritable walking garden. But I digress. That final step, finding an herb and drawing its lines on the lay canvas, is kind of important. It's almost mandatory, really. The search phase is equal parts trying to resolve the quest of the scenario as it is preparing for the upcoming battle. Without extra lines on your canvas, you will be ill-suited for the magic battle phase. On the flip side though, just in case you think you can cheese the scenario by gathering herbs for several actions, there is a time limit in place in the search phase. Because, thematically, staying out in the magical forest for too long is dangerous, even if you have access to the magic of the herbs. This is represented by cycles, an abstract unit of measurement that doesn't necessarily correlate to any real-world measurement. It's literally how many rounds everyone gets to take a turn before the game is over. The magic battle phase is the big climactic part of Floria, where all the herbs and items you've been gathering will come up, and the spell list that's been sitting neglected finally comes into play. Even though it literally has battle in the name, and all the necessary components of a fight are included, the rulebook makes a note that it's not necessarily the case that it's combat you're engaging in, so much as a conflict that's being resolved using magic. Fighting and combat, for better or worse, just happens to be a useful vehicle for getting the idea across, at least in English. I can't necessarily say much for Japanese as I'm only barely literate in that myself. Anyways, point being, Floria is a more lighthearted game, where death isn't necessarily the end result of combat. Enough theoreticals and thematics, though. Mechanics are my mainstay and modus operandi. Magic battles start as any combat does, figuring out initiative. This is a straightforward process, though. Agility is what determines turn order. No dice rolls needed. Though worth noting is that boss monsters will often have multiple actions they can take in one round during the magic battle phase. Thus, they will have multiple agility scores. It uses a different map from the search phase that's divided into 4 parts: an enemy side, a PC side, a front row, and a back row for either side. Every character has a move step and a main step on their turn. Your move step allows you to change which of the rows you're in, and during your main step, you can cast one of your spells. An important thing to note, though, is that during either step, you have the option of using an item that your character possesses, and you may target yourself with it or somebody on the same line as you. And this technically means that yes, you may use 2 items in one turn, forgoing movement and spells altogether. As mentioned earlier, spell costs are paid by filling in the appropriate shapes you can see on your lay canvas. After that, you then roll to see if you successfully cast the spell. The roll for this is determined by your magic style, and you may use magic burst if you don't succeed on this roll. Many spells deal damage, prevent damage, or otherwise manipulate how damage is done. If a spell is successfully cast, then you roll to see where on the target's lay canvas they get hit if it deals damage. And if you look at the lay canvas, you'll notice they have numbers going across the top and side. For every point of damage that a character takes, you'll roll to determine a square on that grid that gets hit. Fill in that square, and then, depending on how many lines go through that square, and if it's already been filled in somehow, that will determine how many life points that character loses. They lose 1 damage for every line that goes through the colored-in square, or 1d6 if the square covers a part that's already been filled in. Now, if a square was originally completely white and had no lines going through it, that character lucks out and loses no life points. Once everybody has acted and used all their actions, you then begin the cleanup phase. Player characters will add 1 line to their lay canvas. This means that in a theoretical stalemate, the player characters are favored, since enemies don't get that sort of resource regeneration. And another way for the players to recover is through the use of attunement. At any time, a player can use 1 point of attunement to draw 1 extra line or have their character recover 1d6 life points. Characters, be they player or non, are knocked out when they lose all their life points, and magic battles end when all the characters on one side are knocked out. So those are all the basics. The next question is this game worth it? At the low price tag and for its unique playstyle, I would say yes. Especially if you want to branch out a little from D&D and try something new. The most difficult part of this game is probably figuring out how the lay canvas works. And some of the spells that manipulate the lay canvas definitely gave me some trouble when I was running this for people. But otherwise, like many tabletop RPGs from Japan, it's very structured and very straightforward. If you ever get lost on what to do as a GM, just consult the flowcharts, figure out where you are on them, and that will lead you to what you need to do next. And if you need some examples of how to prepare for a session of Floria, there's plenty of pre-made scenarios in the back of the book for you to read or even use yourself. And the last thing I want to say is, don't worry about being limited by the structure that Floria uses. Structure is no more than a vessel for your own ideas. It's a cup or a glass that you're pouring the water of your ideas into. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting or helpful, consider giving me a thumbs up like. And if you want to hear more about various tabletop RPGs from Japan, consider subscribing or checking out some of my other videos. With all that said, I am Aaron Darshedel, and I will see you all next time.